Hare Krishna. Dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the live studios in Hythe, Kent, southeast England, just near the English Channel, where we've created a little haven. The word haven is the translation of Hythe in Anglo-Saxon. So in this haven, we've dedicated ourselves to producing and vibrating the sound of Srila Prabhupada's books, which are the basis of the Krishna consciousness movement, and the foundational principles are here, along with all of the more and more elevated principles of Krishna consciousness, all described in full in a language that is understandable, digestible, and practical for practically everyone. Before we begin, we always chant the Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami, which glorifies the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which we will be reading tonight. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaikat Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Purāṇa, Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho, Kalidvando Ditaditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshidayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madguru Man Mahadana, Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya, Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu, sadhuta dayin, atini chochata kada, hanamuncha gadachin mam, premna rit kantayukspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we reached the 13th chapter of the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Krishna has gone back to Dwarka after the battle of Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhishthira has performed his Rajasuya sacrifice before, and the Ashtama sacrifice, Ashtavakra sacrifice before, or after, I mean. And now the story continues when Parikshit Maharaj is going to... anyway, the story continues. We're beginning with text 16. Having won his kingdom and observed the birth of one grandson, competent to continue the noble tradition of his family, Maharaj Yudhishthira reigned peacefully and enjoyed uncommon opulence in cooperation with his younger brothers, who were all expert administrators to the common people. Purport. Both Maharaj Yudhishthira and Arjuna were unhappy from the beginning of the battle of Kurukshetra. But even though they were unwilling to kill their own men in the fight, it had to be done as a matter of duty, for it was planned by the supreme will of Lord Krishna. After the battle, Maharaj Yudhishthira was unhappy over such mass killing of human beings and animals. Practically, there was none to continue the Kuru dynasty after them, the Pandavas. The only remaining hope was the child in the womb of his daughter-in-law, Uttara, and he was also attacked by Ashwatthama. But by the grace of the Lord, the child was saved. So after the settlement of all disturbing conditions and re-establishment of the peaceful order of the state, and after seeing the surviving child, Parikshit, well satisfied, Maharaj Yudhishthira, so after the settlement of all disturbing conditions and re-establishment of the peaceful order of the state, and after seeing the surviving child, Parikshit, well satisfied, Maharaj Yudhishthira felt some relief as a human being, although he had very little attraction for material happiness, which is always illusory and temporary. Text 17. Insurmountable, eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are insanely attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thought. Purport. I am now happy. I have everything in order. My bank balance is quite enough. I can now give my children enough estate. I am now successful. The poor beggar sannyasis depend on God, but they come to beg from me. Therefore, I am more than the Supreme God. These are some of the thoughts which engross the insanely attached householder who is blind to the passing of eternal time. Our duration of life is measured, and no one is able to enhance it even by a second against the scheduled time ordained by the Supreme Will. Such valuable time, especially for the human being, should be cautiously spent, because even a second passed away imperceptibly cannot be replaced, even in exchange for thousands of gold coins amassed by hard labor. Every second of human life is meant for making an ultimate solution to the problems of life, that is, repetition of birth and death, and revolving in the cycle of 8,400,000 species of life. The material body, which is subject to birth and death, diseases, and old age, is the cause of all sufferings of the living being. Otherwise, the living being is eternal. He is never born, nor does he ever die. Foolish persons forget this problem. They do not know at all how to solve the problems of life, but become engrossed in temporary family affairs, not knowing that eternal time is passing away imperceptibly and that their measured duration of life is diminishing every second, without any solution to the big problem, namely repetition of birth and death, disease and old age. This is called illusion. But such illusion cannot work on one who is awake in the devotional service of the Lord. Yudhishthira Maharaj and his brothers the Pandavas were all engaged in the service of the Lord Sri Krishna, and they had very little attraction for the illusory happiness of this material world. As we have discussed previously, Maharaj Yudhishthira was fixed in the service of the Lord Mukunda, the Lord who can award salvation, and therefore he had no attraction even for such comforts of life as are available in the kingdom of heaven, because even the happiness obtained on the planet Brahmaloka is also temporary and illusory. Because the living being is eternal, he can be happy only in the eternal abode of the kingdom of God, Paravyoma, from which no one returns to this region of repeated birth and death, disease and old age. Therefore, any comfort of life or any material happiness which does not warrant an eternal life, but is illusion for the living being. Therefore, any comfort of life or any material happiness which does not warrant an eternal life is but illusion for the eternal living being. One who factually understands this is learned, and such a learned person can sacrifice any amount of material happiness to achieve the desired goal known as Brahmasukham, or absolute happiness. Real transcendentalists are hungry for this happiness, and as a hungry man cannot be made happy by all comforts of life minus foodstuff, so the man hungry for eternal absolute happiness cannot be satisfied by any amount of material happiness. Therefore, the instruction described in this verse cannot be applied to Maharaj Yudhishthira or his brothers and mother. It was meant for persons like Dhṛtarāṣṭra, for whom Vidura came especially to impart lessons. Text 18. Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhṛtarāṣṭra saying, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you." Purport. Cruel death cares for no one, be he Dhṛtarāṣṭra or even Maharaj Yudhishthira. Therefore, spiritual instruction, as was given to old Dhṛtarāṣṭra, was equally applicable to younger Maharaj Yudhishthira. As a matter of fact, everyone in the royal palace, including the king and his brothers and mother, was raptly attending the lectures. But it was known to Vidura that his instructions were especially meant for Dhṛtarāṣṭra, who was too materialistic. The word Rajan is especially addressed to Dhṛtarāṣṭra significantly. Dhṛtarāṣṭra was the eldest son of his father, and therefore, according to law, he was to be installed on the throne of Hastinapur. But because he was blind from birth, he was disqualified from his rightful claim. But he could not forget the bereavement, and his disappointment was somewhat compensated after the death of Pandu, his younger brother. His younger brother left behind him some minor children, and Dhṛtarāṣṭra became the natural guardian of them, but at heart he wanted to become the factual king and hand the kingdom over to his own sons, headed by Duryodhana. With all these imperial ambitions, Dhṛtarāṣṭra wanted to become a king, and he contrived all sorts of intrigues in consultation with his brother-in-law, Shakuni. But everything failed by the will of the Lord, and at the last stage, even after losing everything, men and money, he wanted to remain as king, being the eldest uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthir. Maharaj Yudhishthir, as a matter of duty, maintained Dhṛtarāṣṭra in royal honor, and Dhṛtarāṣṭra was happily passing away his numbered days in the illusion of being a king, or the royal uncle of King Yudhishthir. Vidura, as a saint and as the duty-bound, affectionate youngest brother of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, wanted to awaken Dhṛtarāṣṭra from his slumber of being a false king, driven to disease and old age by the force of powerful time. Vidura therefore sarcastically addressed Dhṛtarāṣṭra as the king, which he was actually not. Everyone is the servant of eternal time, and therefore no one can be king in this material world. King means the person who can order. The celebrated English king wanted to order time and tide, but the time and tide refused to obey his order. Therefore, one is a false king in this material world. And Dhṛtarāṣṭra was particularly reminded of this false position and of the factual, fearful happenings which had already approached him at that time. Vidura asked him to get out immediately if he wanted to be saved from the fearful situation which was approaching him fast. He did not ask Maharaj Yudhishthir in that way because he knew that a king like Maharaj Yudhishthir is aware of all the fearful situations of this flimsy world and would take care of himself in due course, even though Vidura might not be present at that time. Text 19. This frightful situation cannot be remedied by anything or any person in this material world. My Lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as eternal time, Kala, that has approached us all. Purport. There is no superior power which can check the cruel hands of death. No one wants to die, however acute one's bodily sufferings may be. Even in these days of so-called scientific advancement of knowledge, there is no remedial measure either for old age or for death. Old age is the notice of the arrival of death served by cruel time, and no one can refuse to accept either summon calls or the supreme judgment of eternal time. This is explained before Dhṛtarāṣṭra because he might order Vidura to find out some remedial measure for the imminent fearful situation, as Dhṛtarāṣṭra had ordered many times before. Before Vidura was so ordered, however, he informed Dhṛtarāṣṭra that there was no remedial measure by anyone or from any source in this material world. And because there is no such thing in the material world, death is identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as it is said by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 10:34. Death cannot be checked by anyone or from any source within this material world. Hiranyakashipu wanted to be immortal and underwent a severe type of penance by which the whole universe trembled, and Brahma himself approached him to dissuade Hiranyakashipu from such a severe type of penance. Hiranyakashipu asked Brahma to award him the blessings of immortality, but Brahma said that he himself was subject to death, even in the topmost planet. So how could he award him the benediction of immortality? So there is death even in the topmost planet of this universe, and what to speak of other planets, which are far, far inferior in quality to Brahmaloka, the residing planet of Brahma. Wherever there is the influence of eternal time, there is this set of tribulations, namely birth, disease, old age, and death, and all of them are invincible. Text 20. Whoever is under the influence of supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things, such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. Purport. A great Indian scientist, busy in the plan-making business, was suddenly called by invincible eternal time while going to attend a very important meeting of the Planning Commission, and he had to surrender his life, wife, children, house, land, wealth, etc. During the political upsurge in India and its division into Pakistan and Hindustan, so many rich and influential Indians had to surrender life, property, and honor due to the influence of time. And there are hundreds and thousands of examples like that all over the world, all over the universe, which are all effects of the influence of time. Therefore, the conclusion is that there is no powerful living being within the universe who can overcome the influence of time. Many poets have written verses lamenting the influence of time. Many devastations have overtaken the universes due to the influence of time, and no one could check them by any means. Even in our daily life, so many things come and go in which we have no hand. But we have to suffer or tolerate them without remedial measure. That is the result of time. Text 21. Your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and passed away. You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in the home of another. Purport. The king is reminded of his precarious condition, influenced by cruel time, and by his past experience. He should have been more intelligent to see what was going to happen to his own life. His father, Vichitravirya, died long ago when he and his younger sons were all little children, and it was due to the care and kindness of Bhishmadev that they were properly brought up. Then again his brother Pandu died also. Then in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, his 100 sons and his grandsons all died, along with all other well-wishers like Bhishmadev, Dronacharya, Karna, and many other kings and friends. So he had lost all men and money, and now he was living at the mercy of his nephew, whom he had put into troubles of various types. And despite all these reverses, he thought that he would prolong his life more and more. Vidura wanted to point out to Dhṛtarāṣṭra that everyone has to protect himself by his action and by the grace of the Lord. One has to execute his duty faithfully, depending for the result on the supreme authority. No friend, no children, no father, no brother, no state, and no one else can protect a person who is not protected by the Supreme Lord. One should therefore seek the protection of the Supreme Lord, and the human form of life is meant for seeking that protection. He was warned of his precarious conditions more and more by the following words. Text 22. You have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. Purport. The symptoms of old age, which had already developed in Dhṛtarāṣṭra, were all one after another pointed out to him as warning that death was nearing very quickly, and still he was foolishly carefree about his future. The signs pointed out by Vidura in the body of Dhṛtarāṣṭra were signs of apakshaya, or dwindling of the material body before the last stroke of death. The body is born, develops, stays, creates other bodies, dwindles, and then vanishes. But foolish men want to make a permanent settlement of the perishable body and think that their estate, children, society, country, and so on will give them protection. With such foolish ideas, they become overtaken by such temporary engagements and forget altogether that they must give up this temporary body and take a new one, again to arrange for another term of society, friendship, and love, again to perish ultimately. They forget their permanent identity and become foolishly active for impermanent occupations, forgetting altogether their prime duty. Saints and sages like Vidura approach such foolish men to awaken them to the real situation. But they take such sadhus and saints as parasites of society. And almost all of them refuse to hear the words of such sadhus and saints, although they welcome show-bottle sadhus and so-called saints who can satisfy their senses. Wow. Prabhupada ki jai. Vidura was not a sadhu to satisfy the ill-gotten sentiment of Dhṛtarāṣṭra. He was correctly pointing out the real situation of life and how one can save oneself from such catastrophes. Text 23. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. Purport. A sadhu should never flatter kings or rich men to live comfortably at their cost. A sadhu is to speak to the householders about the naked truth of life, so that they may come to their senses about the precarious life in material existence. Dhṛtarāṣṭra is a typical example of an attached old man in household life. He had become a pauper in the true sense, yet he wanted to live comfortably in the house of the Pandavas, of whom Bhima especially is mentioned because personally he killed two prominent sons of Dhṛtarāṣṭra, namely Duryodhana and Dushasana. These two sons were very much dear to him for their notorious and nefarious activities, and Bhima is particularly pointed out because he killed these two pet sons. Why was Dhṛtarāṣṭra living there at the house of the Pandavas? Because he wanted to continue his life comfortably, even at the risk of all humiliation. Vidura therefore was astonished how powerful is the urge to continue life. This sense of continuing one's life indicates that a living being is eternally a living entity and does not want to change his bodily habitation. The foolish man does not know that a particular term of bodily existence is awarded to him to undergo a term of imprisonment, and the human body is awarded after many, many births and deaths as a chance for self-realization to go back home, back to Godhead. But persons like Dhṛtarāṣṭra try to make plans to live here and a comfortable position with profit and interest, for they do not see things as they are. Dhṛtarāṣṭra is blind and continues to hope to live comfortably in the midst of all kinds of reverses of life. A sadhu like Vidura is meant to awaken such blind persons and thus help them go back to Godhead, where life is eternal. Once going there, no one wants to come back to this material world of miseries. We can just imagine how responsible a task is. We can just imagine how responsible a task is entrusted to a sadhu like Mahatma Vidura. Text 24. There is no need to live a life. There is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted their wife and usurped their kingdom and wealth. Wow. Purport. The system of Varnashram religion sets aside a part of one's life completely for the purpose of self-realization and attainment of salvation in the human form of life. That is a routine division of life, but persons like Dhṛtarāṣṭra want to stay home even at their weary, ripened age, and even in a degraded condition of accepting charity from enemies. Vidura wanted to point out this anomaly to his brother and impress upon him that it was better to die like his sons than accept such humiliating charity. Vidura wanted to point this out and impressed upon him that it was better to die like his sons than to accept such humiliating charity. 5,000 years ago, there was one Dhṛtarāṣṭra, but at the present moment, there are Dhṛtarāṣṭras in every home. Politicians, especially, do not retire from political activities unless they are dragged by the cruel hand of death or killed by some opposing element. To stick to family life up to the end of one's human life is the grossest type of degradation. And there is an absolute need for the Viduras to educate such Dhṛtarāṣṭras even at the present moment. Text 25. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. Purport. The words Kripanasya Jajivasho are significant. There are two classes of men. One is called the Kripana, and the other is called the Brahmana. The Kripana, or the miserly man, has no estimation of his material body, but the Brahmana has a true estimation of himself and the material body. The Kripana, having a wrong estimation of his material body, wants to enjoy sense gratification with his utmost strength. And even in old age, he wants to become a young man by medical treatment or otherwise. Dhṛtarāṣṭra is addressed herein as a Kripana because without any estimation of his material body, he wants to live at any cost. Vidura is trying to open his eyes to see that he cannot live more than his term and that he must prepare for death. Since death is inevitable, why should he accept such a humiliating position for living? It is better to take the right path, even at the risk of death. Human life is meant for finishing all kinds of miseries of material existence, and life should be so regulated that one can achieve the desired goal. Dhṛtarāṣṭra due to his wrong conception of life, had already spoiled 80% of his achieved energy. So it behooved him to utilize the remaining days of his miserly life for the ultimate good. Such a life is called miserly because one cannot properly utilize the assets of the human form of life. Only by good luck does such a miserly man meet a self-realized soul like Vidura, and by his instruction get rid of the nations of material existence. Text 26. He who has not properly utilized his material body is called undisturbed. If he goes to an unknown place and freed from all obligations, indifferently quits his body. Let me repeat this for the benefit of all of us. He who has not properly utilized his material body is called undisturbed if he goes to an unknown place and, freed from all obligations, indifferently quits his body. Purport. Narottam Das Thakur, a great devotee and Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnava sect, has sung, "My Lord, I have simply wasted my life. Having obtained the human body, I have neglected to worship your Lordship, and therefore I have willingly drunk poison." In other words, the human body is especially meant for cultivating knowledge of devotional service to the Lord, without which life becomes full of anxieties and miserable conditions. Therefore, one who has spoiled his life without such cultural activities is advised to leave home without informing his friends and relatives, and being thus freed from all obligations of family, society, country, and so on, give up his body at some unknown destination so that others may not know where and how he has met his death. Dhīra means one who is not disturbed even when there is severe provocation. Usually a man cannot give up a comfortable family life due to his affectionate relation with wife and children. Self-realization is obstructed by such undue affection for family, and if anyone is at all able to forget such a relation, he is called undisturbed or dhīra. This is, however, the path of renunciation based on a frustrated life. But stabilization of such renunciation is possible only by association with bona fide saints and self-realized souls, by which one can be engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord. Sincere surrender under the lotus feet of the Lord is possible by awakening the transcendental sense of service. This is made possible by association with pure devotees of the Lord. Dhṛtarāṣṭra was lucky enough to have a brother whose very association was a source of liberation for his frustrated life. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vidura Mahatma ki jai. All right, we'll stop our reading today. It's 7:47, and I don't mean the plane. I think they're retiring them now. 7:47 p.m. Thank you very much for your kind ears, attentive ears. Now we will take reflections from the assembled sages.
First is from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, and all friends assembled. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and your daily reading service, Maharaj.
Jai Gopakanya Devi Dasi ki jai.
Jai Ho. And from Rati Manjari.
Haribo Rati.
Jai Guru Maharaj. Your reliability is simply wonderful.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. I'd like to be reliable. I'd like to be more and more reliable. But only if Krishna is pleased with me. And the Vaishnavas are pleased with me. That's my goal. Srila Prabhupada, please be pleased with me.
From Sudevi.
Yes, Sudevi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
And from Avadut Roy.
Hare Krishna Avaduta Roy.
Thank you, Maharaj, for immersing us in the nectar of regularly hearing the Dhṛtarāṣṭra in the association of wonderful devotees.
Yes, it is wonderful, isn't it? We're so fortunate. There's that famous verse that says that only in the association of devotees can one actually understand Krishna and hear the glories of the Lord. Satam prasangam mama virya sambido bhavanti rit karana rasana karana. Yes. Hare Krishna. Keep those reflections coming in. Maybe I scared everyone away. Vidura's words were pretty heavy. Pretty heavy. Maybe all the devotees are falling on the ground, recovering.
There's something from Anandamurti.
Hare Krishna Anandamurti.
Dear Guru Maharaj and all assembled devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
Thank you so much for today's reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. It is so important to know about the teachings of Vidura to Dhṛtarāṣṭra, because there are a lot of Dhṛtarāṣṭra even within myself. So I understand how I am fortunate to get such a precious teaching. We are very, very fortunate because Srila Prabhupada explained for us the path to get out from these miseries of material life.
Nice realization. I must say I'm very proud of you. Very proud of you.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. I felt like Srila Prabhupada was on fire tonight. It was a little hard to hear from my conditioned mind, who still has heaps of desires for sense gratification and lofty plans to become comfortable.
Yes, well, this is the duty of real friends. This is the duty of real sadhus. The word sadhu also means to cut. And the sadhu cuts attachments to the material world. That's his duty in life. And Prabhupada was the gargantuan sadhu. The whole earth. He was always speaking to anyone he met the blunt, plain, simple truth about material existence and material civilization, and begging everyone to give up their attachment and surrender to Krishna. Hare Krishna.
This is also from Rati Manjari.
Jai Rati, again, keep it flowing.
But to hear Vidura and Srila Prabhupada hammering on about the influence of time and death was sobering to the bone.
Oh yes. Especially when one is young. Now I've crossed 75. That's a big marker. You know, Prabhupada said, 40 is, what did he call it? There was a word he used with a descriptive word with old age. It's not formal old age. It's not. It's what is it? What did he say? Do you remember? There's a word he used. It's informal. It's not old age, but it's the turning point. You know, up until 40, you're going up. After 40, you start going down. But then he said that 50 is official, is old age. So beginning at 50, you're actually reached old age. Then there's different markers, 60, 70. 70 means you're going into serious old age. Over 75, that's deep old age. Over 80, most people can't do much after 80. So we don't know how old Dhṛtarāṣṭra was, but he's been around a long time. And look how old Bhishma was. He was taking care of, generations before. He was taking care of Pandus and other, he was very, very ancient, Bhishma. And he died on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So there was so much more potency then than there is now, but still, everyone had to die. And when Krishna left, the Pandavas just said, yep, that's it for us. Play is over. They just dropped their royal everything and just walked to the north, and Kunti followed them. Draupadi followed them also. And they just, somewhere along the way, each one of them died. But they did so knowingly, with great glory and embraced by the Lord. That there's a difference, The death of a devotee is different, because a devotee knows, whether he's fully realized or not, he knows what death is, and he knows where he's going. And therefore he knows to prepare himself. And generally speaking, devotees who are in good standing and are still a member of this society are surrounded by loving devotees, chanting and reminding them and giving them all support at that moment. That's a fact. So therefore, Prabhupada always encouraged us to live in the society of devotees, in the company of devotees. And that's why it's so endearing to me, and I'm sure it's edifying to everyone to come to these daily readings and associate with Prabhupada's books with other devotees of like attachment and like mind. Hare Krishna.
This is also Rati Manjari's comment.
Haribo Rati.
The symptoms of old age were so stark to hear about. I find I really almost cannot accept them. This society also does not prepare one for this phase. It simply tries to cover it up.
Yes. Western society covers everything up. You don't see dead bodies. You don't see people dying in the streets. Everything's covered up. That's one of the glories of India. Even though it's not so comfortable materially, although now some people are very comfortable materially, but still, it isn't like the West. It's different, and but it's more conducive to being able to accept properly the real goal of life.
From Gauranga Gopal?
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, what a great chapter. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear Vidura's heavy preaching to Dhṛtarāṣṭra.
Yes.
I noticed a sentence at the end of the last purport you read. Sincere surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is possible by awakening the transcendental sense of service. This is made possible by association with pure devotees of the Lord. Such a great summary of this chapter so far. I feel grateful to be surrounded by great devotees who force me to surrender by engaging me in service, even though my mind is begging to stay under the illusion of comfortable life.
Yes, well, time has its ways, and what it's basically saying of this chapter is that no matter how comfortable you are, when you come to the end, it cannot be comfortable. It is not comfortable. Leaving the body is not comfortable for anyone, even liberated soul. If you want a little sobering up, just tune in to the 1977 audio files of the archives, and you can hear the room conversations with Srila Prabhupada for the last month of his life. And if that doesn't sober you up, nothing will. Hare Krishna.
This is also from Gauranga Gopal.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
When I go out and distribute books, I notice how miserable household life without Krishna consciousness is.
Congratulations.
I meet all these young parents who share with me their spiritual aspirations, but then they are covered again and again and thrown under the illusion of mundane family life.
Yes.
Where time goes without them noticing.
Yes.
They say sometimes with a sad smile, "I don't have time."
Exactly.
And even though they genuinely know their best interest is investing in spiritual life, they feel stuck in this situation and unfortunately reach old age full of regrets and frustrations. I wish I could help them like Vidura helped his brother.
Yes, and it's true, and we all feel like that. That's why we're devotees, and that's why we try to help. But Prabhupada also insisted to us that we should not feel discouraged because not very many people are coming. I think I've mentioned this more than a few times in the last few months, that if you have a very valuable jewel, very valuable, worth so much money that hardly anybody on the earth has that much money, and you can't, display it, and then if nobody comes to buy it, become discouraged and throw it out. Because it's so rare, the person who can buy such a jewel. So we're like that. We're holding the jewel of transcendental knowledge. Every one of Srila Prabhupada's books has the potency to uplift anyone who takes the book. Prabhupada said, if anyone just reads one line, it will change the course, the trajectory of his life. Even if he touches the book, he gets pious credit. Therefore, there is no more auspicious activity than going out and giving Srila Prabhupada's books to the public. Or in some people's cases, reading the books out loud every single day. Hare Krishna.
And this is from Avadut Roy.
Yes, Avadut Roy.
Thank you, Maharaj. Your response reminded me of Srila Prabhupada saying that it's much more important to hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from devotees than to read it on our own. And this is so much proven by our experience here.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And from Daitari Hari.
Daitari Hari Das Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thanks once again for another wonderful reading. I like the point about the Lord being the ultimate protection and that human life is meant for seeking this protection. I'm probably repeating what was reflected on last night about taking shelter, but these readings certainly feel like protection. I'm not so conscious of Krishna in my day-to-day life, but I couldn't see myself going for long without coming here to take advantage of this protection you are offering us via the sound representation of Krishna given through Prabhupada's books.
Hare Krishna, well said, and all I can say is I have nothing to add to that. Thank you so much. Dial Nitai, Hare Krishna.
Dear Srila Guru Maharaj, please accept my obeisance. I don't want to annoy anybody with this question, but upon being asked some days back, I felt my response could have been better. Here we go. If from the spiritual world one does not want to ever come back to this world, as Srila Prabhupada explained today, how is it then that all of us are here, having been there once? Thank you, your servant.
Well, first of all, you cannot know that. You cannot come to that absolute conclusion, one way or another, from where we are. Because we're in time and space. And in spiritual world, there is no time and space. There is no time when something started in the spiritual world, or a time when something ended. So you can't, with the tools that we have, you know, the three dimensions in time and space in the material world, you can't analyze that. And therefore, all of the acharyas, including Srila Prabhupada, say the same thing. It's a waste of your human form of life and your energy to worry about it and try to understand it from an absolute position. Because you're not in an absolute position. You'll understand that when you go back to Godhead. You won't be able to understand it completely. We can understand from Srila Prabhupada's description that the living being is eternally a servant of Krishna. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sabakabu Noi. That's Shastra. Krishna Prema is Nitya Siddha, is in every heart eternally. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sabakabu Noi means every living being has love of Krishna, Krishna Prema, in the heart. It's not something that you get that you haven't had before. It's eternally there. So aside from that, and in addition to that, we have a tiny being fragmental, tiny particles of spirit, a part and parcel of Krishna, the Supreme Spirit. We have an infinitesimal amount of Krishna's qualities. And one of Krishna's qualities is independence. Krishna has supreme independence, and we have infinitesimal independence. And we never lose that, because that's our nature. Even when you're in the spiritual world, even if you've never come to the material world, you have that capacity. Everyone does. All jiva souls, Madhya Yashoda, Radharani, Nandamar, these are not jiva souls. These are eternal, intimate associates. But anybody who's a jiva soul, who by quality is a particle of Krishna, Mamai Jangvangshet Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta, Sanatana. We are called Jiva Bhuta when we're in the material world. We're called Brahma Bhuta when we're in the spiritual world. We're in a different category, but we're still Jiva. How that happened is not possible to trace out. When that happened is not possible to trace out, except to say that our independence, by definition, independence means the ability to misuse it or use it properly. And somehow or other, we misused our independence. That's as much as we know. And as much as we can know. There's a class of devotees who have defined the Tatastha Shakti as a place. But Tatastha doesn't mean a place. It means the jiva has the ability to choose the spiritual world or the material world, to live in the spiritual world or the material world. And that is eternally a part of the jiva soul. It is unchangeable. And it can't be understood by material logic, by the strength of your own intelligence. How can you say when we fell, when we're eternal? And the spiritual world is eternal. You can't say it. Hare Krishna. That's all I can say about that, because that's all Prabhupada taught us. Maybe other people from other traditions say different things, but that's what Prabhupada taught us, and that's what we're going to stand on and live by. Hare Krishna.
There's a question from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
Tonight we heard a lot about the way Vidura told Dhṛtarāṣṭra to prepare for death, to disappear without telling anyone and go into the mountains. I was wondering how a woman like me who is aspiring to be a devotee should prepare for death.
Stay in the society of devotees, and when you leave your body, you'll be surrounded by devotees chanting Hare Krishna into your ear and encouraging you. Hare Krishna.
And from Gauranga Gopal?
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
He says, thank you so much for your great answers, Maharaj. This Q&A is almost better than the reading itself.
Whoa! I wouldn't say that at all, but anyway, thank you.
And from Dayanitai?
Yes, Dayanitai.
Thank you very much, Sri the Guru Maharaj, for your helpful reply.
There's a letter that you can read, right? Just to put a top on this subject. There's a letter that was written to, I think it was Madhuvisa in Australia. He asked Prabhupada the direct question you did. And Prabhupada wrote a letter called the Tall Fruit the Crow and Tall Fruit Logic, or something like that. And it's a letter which describes everything. You can look that up in the database. Crow and Tall Fruit Logic, or letter. Hare Krishna.
Rati Manjari says, thank you for that clear instruction.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I thank you very much again for this lovely, I've been getting a lot of response about recently how the period of reflections have been very sweet and very intense and very, wonderful. And I can say I'm also tasting the same. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic. This time it's going to be the result of Vidura's preaching. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow.